We talked about the privacy threshold analysis. We talked about privacy impact assessments. And we talked about the system of record notice. All of this stuff stems from privacy regulations. And if you're an information system security officer or a cybersecurity professional doing any kind of security compliance whatsoever, you should have some idea of the privacy regulations. Now, that's not to say you should memorize this law or anything. It's enough to just know where the sources are. And in this case, we're talking about the E-Government Act of 2002, Section 208. This defines this defines what PII is and the government's interaction with that privacy information. It defines what all federal organizations will do as far as conducting a privacy impact assessment and the threshold analysis. Federal organizations deal with privacy it also deals with how federal organizations deal with privacy on government websites. So going a little bit deeper, you can go into the actual Office of Management and Budget memorandums. And that goes from anything from guidance on implementing privacy provisions, privacy for personal information on federal records, privacy policies for federal websites. It goes into a little bit more detail of what is expected if you are in a federal organization. And just a little bit about the history of where all of this stuff comes from. One of the very first, most comprehensive privacy regulations was the Privacy Act of 1974. Now, I can't necessarily recommend that you read this one from start to finish, but the E-Government Act of 2002 is definitely worth your time. It gets right to the meat that you need to know, which is conducting privacy impact assessments and threshold analysis. But it's good to know what the Privacy Act of 1974 is, as you will probably have to refer to it from time to time whenever you're sourcing the documents and policies that you're writing for privacy stuff. Now, I myself have usually had to get a little bit of reference for doing privacy impact assessments or threshold analysis, but have not had to go into great detail of any sort for Privacy Act of 1974. It's pretty dated, although it has been updated since 1974, of course. Now, what I don't want you to do is confuse what's going on with the federal standards and regulations with what's going on in the private sector or with stuff overseas. What you should know is that there's a difference between the federal standards in the US and the federal standards in the EU, for example, as far as privacy laws are concerned. And so some of those differences consist of the US depends on the organization's terms of services. Okay, stop. I'm going to start over with these differences. Okay, let's start from here. All right. There's three main differences between the United States and the EU as far as the private sector is concerned. Now, I don't want you to confuse the federal mandates with the private mandates and the US's laws with the EU laws. So let's just talk about a little bit of the differences. First of all, the private sector, when you're talking about Facebook or Google or any kind of private organization, they don't go by Privacy Act of 1974 or the privacy laws such as E-Government Act of 2002. Those are specifically for federal organizations and how they're supposed to treat information. What private organizations have to go by, Facebook, Google, and Craig Auto Parts or insurance agencies or things like that, they're supposed to go by the Federal Trade Commission's laws. They handle the privacy laws and enforcement. And this deals with things like COPPA, the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, identity theft, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. Things like that are what are supposed to protect private individuals at private organizations. There's also a difference between how the United States treats their private information and how the EU treats their private information. So a couple of the big differences is that the US depends on the organization's terms of service, and they can retain the data freely. Whereas in the EU, laws allows consumers to modify and control or remove data collected about them. So the EU allows you, the consumer, to say, hey, I want you to take my information down, or hey, don't use my information. Whereas when you sign that little terms of service on Facebook or wherever you're at, you can kind of end up signing your life away as far as your privacy is concerned. Another big difference between the EU and the US is that in the US, only federal privacy laws are universal statewide. Additionally, privacy laws are set at a state level. So California has some differences in laws as far as privacy is concerned that are different from, say, Georgia or Alabama or Florida or whatever. They have different laws, but there are national laws that kind of go over all the states. But in the EU, it's different. They have a singular regulatory power that enforces a single privacy law for all the 28 members of the EU, all the member countries. Another difference is that in the US, federal laws mandate sites, apps for children under the age of 13 to obtain parental consent before collecting data, and that's why you have things like COPPA and things like that. But in the EU, anyone under the age of 16 must obtain a parental consent before online services may be collected about them. So it's pretty similar. So one is under 13 in the US, and in the EU, it's under the age of 16. So they're a little bit stricter on privacy of individuals in the EU, and a little bit more footloose and fancy-free in the United States as far as privacy is concerned. Other privacy regulations that you might be aware of, depending on where you are and what standards that you have to maintain, are things like Hipaa, GDPR, COPPA, CCPA. So starting from the top, Hipaa is the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, and this deals with the healthcare industry. This is protection of patients' digital information as far as their healthcare and medical records are concerned. So if you happen to be in the medical industry, federal or not federal, this may apply to you. So you might have to spend a little bit more time on Hipaa in addition to doing PII. GDPR is for the EU, and when we were talking about these laws here, this is GDRU type stuff. So GDRU is General Data Protection Regulations, and it's under EU law and for the protection and privacy of EU members. And this might pertain to you if you work in a federal space that is inclusive of taking clients' information who happen to be from the EU, then this might actually apply to you. COPPA, this is dealing with children's information, and if you've ever been on YouTube, you might have seen something like this about protecting children's online privacy. Because what happens sometimes is that organizations will take children's information and start reselling it. So they've made another law to make it so that children don't have to deal with this. Little kids under the age of 13 don't have to deal with this. And then CCPA, this is California Consumer Protection Act. It's a state statute in California that focuses on protecting consumers who are residents of the state of California. So if you happen to be in the state of California, this might apply to your system. So these are just some of the things that you might have to do. And there are many other privacy regulations and standards that you might have to apply to your organization. You just need to be aware of your environment and what is going on. All right, see you on the next one.